Hey guys, what's up? I hope everyone's doing well today. We're going to be making a little robot ball in Blender. So this is for people who aren't too experienced. We're going to cover a few things. So first of all, Shift A. We're going to bring up the add screen, then go over to Mesh, then UV Sphere to add a little ball to your scene. Right now, the piece I need is facing upwards, so we're just going to rotate it. We're going to click here on the red, which is the X-axis, and then while you're rotating on it, just tap 90 on your numpad to rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis. Cool. So now you can see that little eye shape is pointing towards us. We can use that. We'll use that later. And then next up, I think I'm going to add some smooth shading to this. Let's just drag this up a bit. Give us some room for our legs. Cool. We're going to right click, shade smooth. We're going to work on that a bit later now, but we'll get there. Cool, so next up, let's start with the feet. Make sure you're in object mode. Shift A, mesh plane. Then we're going to work on the foot. First of all, let's just hide the circle. Click on it and tap H to hide. It's not deleted, we can unhide it a bit later. Cool. So now I'm going to go into top view, which is 7 on your numpad. Click on it, go into edit mode with tab. And now I'm going to do some cuts on this plane so we can start shaping our foot. So you're going to tap K to bring up the knife tool, click, and then click on both edges. And then when you're ready or happy with your selection, you can press enter to actually cut it. So just click and then press enter. We're going to make a few of these. Don't worry about preciseness, we can edit the verts a bit later. So just making a rough little shape. And then once we have all the cuts, we're going to delete the parts we don't need. So tap 3 to go into face selection mode, and then you can just choose the faces. I'm holding in shift to choose multiple objects. Right, once I've chosen that, I'm just going to tap delete and then faces. Okay, so this looks very rough. We're just going to go back into edit mode, well, object mode, and just rescale it a bit. And once we're ready, happy with the scale, go back into edit mode, and now we're going to drag those ugly edges back to where they should be. We're going to go press 1 to go into vert select mode, put on transform, the transform gizmo, so we can drag stuff around, just to get a better look of this. I'm just lining that up using the lines on the grid. Okay. So I think we should add a solidify modifier to this foot after we scale it. So just go over to add modifier and make sure your foot is selected. So add modifier and go down to solidify. So let's give it some thickness. 0. I think 7 will be fine. 0.07. Now we have some thickness to it. Just apply the modifier. Cool. Now I'm just going to use the gizmo to position the foot roughly to the shape it should be, or the place it should be. So I rotate it and press 90, and then rotate again and press 180 to get this snap rotation. Just positioning it to where it should be. Okay, so this cursor is where your objects will be spawned once you press Shift A. To move your cursor, press Control, no, it's Shift S, and then, yeah, choose cursor to active, Shift S. So the stuff will spawn from this side, just to make it a bit easier for us. Shift A, choose a cube, bring in your cube. I'm just rescaling the cube a bit. We're going to be using this cube for the leg. Right, so now I'm going to change the orientation to the normal orientation instead of global. So it'll just be a lot easier for us to place something in the scene. Okay, once this leg is done, we're gonna add some bevels, but at the moment bevels aren't gonna come out great because we don't have any supporting loops. So let's just first put in some supporting loops and let me try this again. So go into edit mode, then Control R to bring up the edge loop tool. I'm just gonna click and then drag them to where they should be. And you can use this when you're doing subdivision on your objects as well to keep it from deforming strangely. Shift A, add a cylinder, and we're going to be using the cylinder as the joints. So I'm just going to go back to global orientation. And yeah, just rotating this thing to snap. Scaling it a bit down with S and drag. And just positioning it by eye. This isn't very precise because it's just practice anyway. And shade smooth, but we're getting some strange shading, so we're going to go to objects, down to normals, and click auto smooth. You'll be using auto smooth a lot if you're doing hard surface. Alright, now we're just going to duplicate this with Shift and D. Shift D, and then it'll duplicate. Just drag that. And we'll do the same for the leg. Just Shift D, click that, and then you can just drag it out. The leg's looking way too straight, so let's just give it some rotation. And when you're rotating, just make sure you're rotating on the axis and not doing a strange free rotate, because that does happen by accident sometime and it can cause some frustration. Just keep an eye out for that. Let's just drop the ball a bit to touch on the leg. That looks semi-okay. Okay, so now, just pulling that right, we're going to join up. Let's just first go to render view. Can see if you have any shading issues. Let's add a material and call it black, or make it black firstly. Go into edit mode, rename black, make the color black, and then press assign with your joint selected. Just click there, black, and it'll go there. Let's just add materials to the rest of this, make it a bit easier for us to see what's happening. New material and call that body. And let's add a new one, call that legs. Let's bump the metallic up on that and bring down the roughness. Right, now we can click on the other leg and apply that to that as well. Okay, a little bit less rough. There we go. Now I want to join these up all into one mesh, so it'll make it easier when we mirror it to the other side. So I'm just gonna shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click to have all of these, and then Control J to join them all into one mesh. Now I see I've got some strange shading, so let's go back down, put auto smooth back on again. All good. So next step, left click, add modifier, mirror modifier. Click here on the mirror object and we'll use the body. The body will be the middle, so it can mirror over to the other side on that. Gonna click apply to make this a new object. Click back on it, add another mirror modifier, and mirror it on, I think it's the Z axis, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the Z. Make sure you just have Z selected. So it's gonna use the body as a mirror point, so we can actually move is the legs or the body. The legs. We can move the legs, and that'll adjust itself. All right. And just apply that as well. I think we can start on the texturing, which is going to be the most. No, just add a little bit more detail to the body. So into edit mode we go, then click C to get the selection tool, and then you can just left click and you can select, and if you want to deselect something you can use middle mouse button. Press E to extrude inwards into the body. We get the strand shading, which is by the normals again. Put it back on auto smooth. Looking better. Let's just pull that a bit more in. Right, we can use this as the lens, or part of the lens. To make the outside of the lens, I'm going to go into object mode, shift A, mesh, UV sphere, bring in another ball. I just want to use this top piece of it. So I'm going to press C again, and then select that. And with the parts selected, I'll press P, and then say selection. So it's going to separate the two meshes. Okay, now the part I don't need, I'm going to delete it. And this part, I'm going to use as a lens. A little glass cap. So rotate 90 and then rotate 180 on the x-axis, the red one. Right, now I'm just going to pull this into position. Okay, from now I'm going to press 1 to go into front view to see. But my thing is upside down or back to front, and I just press Control 1 and it'll give me a back view. Now I can reposition this properly. Shade smooth it. Cool. Let's just give it a different color so we can see what's going on. Any color you want to. We're going to add a texture later. Okay, so now let's make this glass for the robot's lens. Click, name it glass. We're going to ramp up the transmission, make that full. Without that, it's not going to be a glass texture. We're going to activate screen space refraction. We're going to go into render properties. Tick screen space reflections. But I realized I missed something here, and it's not going to work until I do it, and I'll fix it in a few seconds now. Let's bring the roughness down as well. Roughness is the amount of shininess it has. So, okay, what I did there was I hid the lens as well. So hide the lens. Go back onto your body object. With that thing still selected, add a new material and press assign. So it'll go on to just that piece of the mesh. Insert a emission material and then ramp up the strength on any color you want to. Add bloom so we can actually see the emission, because Eevee doesn't always have a good emission onto it. So the bloom helps it. See, you can see I can't see through the lens, so I have to go back to my render properties because there's one checkbox I didn't tick. Yeah, it's under screen space reflections. I didn't put refraction on. That's the one I forgot. Okay, so now we have our lens working. I just want to make the IOR, the index of refraction, a bit different so we can actually have a better effect on the lens. There we go. Okay, now let's add some detail to the body. By alt clicking, alt left click, we can select the whole ring on the mesh. Alt left click and then shift alt left click and you'll select additional rings. So that's selected, E then S for extrude and a scale. It gives us this cool effect we have here, and that'll be the majority of your modeling career, just E and S. You're going to be using that the whole time. So with that scaled down in, we're going to bevel these two edges. So press 2 to go into edge select and then alt click on the first edge and then alt shift left click on the second edge. Then we have them both selected. We're going to press Control B to activate bevel. And once you've clicked Alt B, or just B, once you've clicked B, you can just move your mouse up and down to adjust the level of bevel and scroll your mouse up and down for the amount of sections in your bevel, which will give you a smoother or a sharper bevel. Less edges, a sharper bevel, more edges, smoother bevel. Okay, so I think that's enough modeling. I want to move on to the texturing now, which is going to be probably the hardest part. So for texturing, we're going to select this ring and then Alt Control E and then mark seam, and then this one as well with Alt left click and then Control E mark seam. This will tell the texture what its limits are and that it can't go over. And then we're going to select everything in that one section, unwrap it, add a texture, and so on and so forth. So the easiest way to do it, I'm going to side view with 3 on the numpad, Z, and then go into wireframe mode, then press B to activate box select, and just make sure you have pressed 3 as well to go into face select mode, otherwise you're going to be selecting edges, which is going to make your own life a lot more difficult. And you can see you'll be in face select by these little dots that are in between all the faces. Okay, now B and select that. We'll have one ring that's not selected in the one section. So the easiest way is to control select, control shift select, which is like an additional select basically. So you'll hold shift, press left click there, hold shift and control, press there, and there, and there. So we're gonna make this one section 1. So first unwrap, part U, you press U and then you select unwrap. That's the way to unwrap. Let me just open the UV editor over here. Doesn't look bad. Then I'm going to add this to a vertex group to make it easier to select a bit later when we want to adjust our UVs. So go into object data, vertex groups, add new. We're going to call this section 1. and then assign, then we will be sure that that is section 1 and we can always go back to it. So we can just go into our vertex groups and press select, and that'll automatically select that section, so we don't have to do it again. Okay, let's do section 2. Again, we're going to go into wireframe mode, box select with B, and select the section. Okay, and then we're going to assign that U, unwrap, add a new vertex group, call it section 2, assign it. Just to make sure it's selected, we go section 2, okay, back into wireframe, and let's do section 3 now. And then again we have that little section that didn't select, so we're going to left click, then control left, shift left control, left click, and control shift left click the whole time to have all of that sorted. New vertex group, section 3, assigned, U, unwrap. Okay, that's all the unwrapping done. Now we're going to start adding texture. So I did provide a little folder with textures in we're going to be using. You can get it from the link, it's on my Dropbox. Let me just open up another window for shading editor. There we go. So let's go. Press Shift A, go to texture, image texture, choose that, drop it in, go to where you saved the folder you downloaded from the link. It'll have about like 5 pictures in there. Those are all textures. Go to base color, double click, it'll load into that slot, and just connect it to base color. And that'll be the texture for body. The texture you named body, everything that's applied, it's applied to will have that texture on it now. But as we can see, it's all over the show. So let's go and select section 1, and we're gonna reposition it. If we want to hide this wireframe so we can actually see what we're doing, I'll show you now. Press A in the UV to select all the UVs, because that's where you're going to be doing your moving. Don't move your actual mesh on top, because then you'll be deforming it. You're just changing the UV layout. Yeah, so to hide this wireframe, it's going to go up here by overlays and disable them. So you can move yours however you want to. It's not exact science, but later on when you're doing more extravagant work and you have dealing with studios and stuff, I mean, then you're going to be really precise about this. But this is just a crash course into UV unwrapping and texturing. And if it looks like I'm struggling, it is because I am, because the controls are inverted. Whatever is happening here on the bottom is completely inverted and mirrored to what's happening on top. So I'm just getting a good look. And when you're working in the UV space, the one there at the bottom, S would be scaling, G would be to move around the actual map and adjust the textures, and R would be to rotate them. So now moving on to section 2, 3 I mean, section 3, the bum, which looks okay, so I'm not even going to bother with that. And then move on to section 2, which did not unwrap properly, as you'll see now. It's got a nasty bending to it, so it's going to need another cut to actually have good UVs. So I'm going to put the overlays back on, back into edit mode. Press 2 for edge select. I'm going to select these bottom two edges. Control E, mark seam, and then select section 2 again, and just unwrap that little part. Unwrap. Now we can see it's a bit more uniform. So you're at the bottom, I'm press G, and then drag, and then S to scale. That looks okay. But we're going to add more maps to the texture now, and that's when it's going to really come alive and actually look like metal. Because right now it's only got a color map to that texture with no other data. Okay, so let's add those maps now. You can either press Shift A and bring up another texture file, but I'm just going to copy the other one by pressing Control C, then Control V, Control C, Control V. Just make sure you have 4 of them, because we're going to be using 4 texture files. Okay, plug this one into metallic, next one into roughness, and let's load these files. So metallic goes to metallic, and roughness goes to roughness. Cool, looking good so far. But for the normal map, we're gonna have to create a converter first. So vector, then normal map, color to color, and normal to normal. Color space, non-color, and then we're gonna choose the normal map. The normal map has, how can I say, like indents and deep lines that fake geometry to be easier to render, so you can fake a lot of detail with a good normal map. It's good for scales or tiny bumps, texture on a gun, somewhere where you don't want to spend a lot of actual geometry. So I chose the leg there and went into edit mode, unwrap the feet, and then instead of using the legs texture, we're going to use the body texture. Seeing that the texture has already been applied and we don't have to do all that work over again. And there you go. And then you can go learn rigging, so you can make your robot move. You can check some tutorials out for rendering. Yeah, limits are endless, guys. Thank you if you watched all the way to the end of this tutorial. It wouldn't be bad if you guys subscribed. And yeah, I'll keep making more tutorials and try to put effort into making more more tutorials, because I've got, like, I did one and now this one, and I've got all these things I want to do, but time is such a big issue. So if I get more subscribers, more likes, I'll end up doing more and more often. Thank you guys very much.